all of these faces in this room, and of course, the folks who are attending virtually, I could not be more excited to be standing here. So welcome to the 19th annual IWIRC spring meeting. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Redwine. I practice with Hendren Redwine and Malone in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I am the co-director of U.S. programming, along with my incredible partner, Chrissy Sanfilippo, who is with Cousin O'Connor out of Chicago. And we could not be more excited about the programming today, and a little feather in our caps of this is one of the largest IWIRC conferences we've had. So we've had 168 registrants, and we actually had to open a wait list. So if you look to your left and right, there are other people who would like to be sitting there. It's a little bit like Harvard Law School. So just to put that in there. So, but that of course is possible because of our great leadership. Thank you, Jen Kimball. But it's really possible because of all of you who are sitting in this room. It strikes me that IWIRC doesn't work without all of you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us, whether you're here or around the world tuning in via Zoom. We are really happy to have you. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. You've got your Wi-Fi passwords, so you can always be connected on either side of the room. If you are inclined to social media it up, hashtag IWIRC spring meeting would be awesome if you could put that on there. And then also, this is the serious part. For the folks who are attending virtually who want credit for this incredible programming that we've got for you, in the chat function, there will be codes that will come through. Make sure you write down those codes because at the end of the programming, you're going to have to submit them. Everyone in the room is not jealous of you attending virtually because none of us have to write down codes. Also, IWIRC is now an accredited provider of continuing professional education, which means we're required to do those polling questions during each session if we've got financial advisors and CPAs participating. So I'm going to jump right in because I know you guys are looking at the schedule and you're like an hour and a half, good gracious. But with these wonderful women that we've got on the stage here, it is going to fly by. And this is a really cool panel. It's going to be very interactive. I will leave it to them to explain. But this is the Harnessing the Power of Diversity, a Global Narrative. And I will say just briefly, when we started planning this, it was more of a, what is diversity programming? What are the pitfalls? What are the advantages and disadvantages? And I will say this incredible group of women took that and really transformed it into something that I think is a bit more positive of what is the global narrative? What are each of these women's stories about their experiences with diversity programming? So that's what you're going to hear about. Let me run through who is on stage. We've got Dania Slim, and then Tayyibah Arif. We've got Shante George, Michelle Crockett, and then of course, last but not least, Judge Elizabeth Stong at the very end. So with that, I will turn it over to them and look forward to a great program. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Dania Slim. I'm a partner at Pillsbury. And I think we were supposed to have an image up to sort of help kick off the discussions. But I mean, I think we can still wing this. And if it doesn't come up, we can still talk about the image because I think it's going to help set the stage for what we're hoping to accomplish this morning. We were going to start off with each one of us talking a little bit about our journey. But before we do that, I wanted to ask Tayyibah to please go ahead and again, I don't know if Sherry, we can get that image up in time or not, but it's one that again will help set the stage for today's discussion.
Well, I'll get started and hopefully you'll see the image come up. So
there it is.
Oh, there it is. So it's early in the morning and you're wondering, why do we have an elephant up on the screen? So some of you may be familiar with the fable from the Hindu tradition, which inspired the Sufi poet and philosopher Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi to compose his poem, The Elephant in the Dark. The poem relates to the story of a merchant who brings in a mysterious creature, an elephant, back to his village, which he stores in the barn. And in the dark of the night, several curious villagers sneak in one by one to figure out what he's put in there. One of them, after touching the elephant's legs, declares that the animal is round and tall, like a tree trunk. Another, feeling the trunk, reports that it's a water pipe kind of creature. And a third, feeling the tusks, declares that it's a creature with a porcelain sword. So each person touches a part of the elephant in the dark and cannot fathom the other's perspectives, or accept that they each know only a small piece of the truth. So Rumi ends his poem with the following words: each of us touches one place and understands the whole in that way. The palm and the fingers feeling in the dark are how the senses explore the reality of the elephant. If each of us held a candle there, and if we went in together, we could see it. So we wanted to share this with you as an illustration of why diversity is so important. Essentially, when we all come together with our different and diverse perspectives and experiences, we can see the whole picture, be stronger together, and achieve better results. The question is how to harness the power of diversity, and this is what we're here to do today. So I'll pass back to Dania to introduce herself.
Thank you, and that was lovely. So like I said, we're going to sort of start this off by having each one of us talk for a couple minutes about our personal journey, but also to give you a sense of what what we're hoping to do in the next hour and a half. We're going to be up here to talk for about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, and then we're going to do a sort of roundtable discussions and some questions that are on your table. So with that, I'll kick it off by just sharing a little bit about me and the perspectives that I bring to the table. Like I said, my name is Dania Slim, and I'm a partner at Pillsbury. I am a first generation Hispanic woman, so that's one of sort of the perspectives that I bring. I was born in Cuba and moved to the United States when I was 5. Grew up in South Florida and spent most of my time there up until the time that I went to law school here in DC. I graduated from law school. I was first attorney in my family, first one to have a postgraduate degree. I started practicing right at the beginning of the recession, right when Lehman filed, and it was a tough time, but I've been with the same firm my entire career, and that I think is another perspective that I bring to this, which is that I'm homegrown or a lifer. I've never been elsewhere, and my path to partnership at Pillsbury wasn't always clear, and it wasn't always straight. Like I said, when I started, I was actually in the real estate group, but because it was of the times, there were no deals, like nothing was happening. So a week into like my first year at Pillsbury, I had thankfully met an insolvency partner who remembered that I was a Spanish speaker, and tells me, do you want to come with me to Puerto Rico to file Chapter 11, a debtor case? And I had nothing else to do. I hadn't taken bankruptcy in law school, so you can imagine my excitement. But I had nothing else, nothing going on, and I was very worried. A lot of my friends really were being laid off, offers were being rescinded, and I have been doing this bankruptcy, that is, ever since. I look back. I was in DC and moved back to South Florida, and that was another point in my journey where I thought I was going to have to leave my firm, but I didn't. Thankfully, they said, we're going to figure out how to make this work, and they did. And I've been with the same firm my entire career. The other perspective that I think sort of I bring to the table is I am a working parent. I'm a mom of 3 young children, 9, 7, and 2.5. And that I think when we talk later on about sort of barriers and things that we've had to overcome, I think for me was finding that balance, right? Being a mom, figuring out what I wanted to do. And lastly, on the sort of diversity and inclusion issues, I really didn't start to get involved, if I'm being honest, with this topic until I was a bit more senior in my career. As I moved up the ranks, I realized that there were less and less of us. And when I say us, I mean women and also, attorneys of color. And now, especially as a mom of 2 girls, I mean, I have a son as well, but for my daughters especially, I hope that by the time that they start, I say practicing, but whether it's a lawyer, doctor, whatever they do, that professions overall are a bit more diverse and a bit more reflective of our society. So that's sort of my journey. Why don't we start with Tayyibah?
Sure, that was very inspiring, Dania, thank you. Hi, I'm Tayyibah Arif. I'm counsel in the financial restructuring team at Deckard, based in its London office. So I'm originally from Pakistan, where I was fortunate enough to be born to incredibly supportive parents, especially my father, who equipped me with education, which really is a privilege, especially for girls over there, and gave me the opportunity to follow my own path, which kind of took me from a pre-med student getting into med school, deciding I didn't want to be a doctor, studying abroad, going to London to study at the London School of Economics, switching to law, starting life out as a private equity lawyer, and now happily ending in the restructuring industry. So quite a journey, and a lot of stars have had to align to get me to this place. And I think to this day, I consider working, or the right to work, just like education, to be a true privilege. Maybe not when I'm up at 3 a.m. turning dots, but like most of the time. And it's a privilege to be here talking to you all today. And I think in terms of different perspectives, I would just say that I had, in terms of COVID fact, I had a COVID baby. So my daughter Zana and I arrived back from the hospital 3 days before lockdown started in London, and life as we know it changed completely. So, and my husband and I changed jobs during COVID as well. So new baby, new jobs. It's no wonder we didn't take up a COVID hobby. Awesome.
Yeah, well, I'm Shante George, and I'm a principal at Baker Tilly, which is a public accounting firm. And like my other panelists, my path has not been linear at all. I think in my mind, I pretend it has been linear. I pretend that I made all of these decisions that have led me to where I am today. But I am starting to realize that it was about the stars being aligned, and it's about raising your hand, and it was about asking questions. So I started, I grew up in the Bronx, New York with my mom, single family household until 13 years later, my sister shows up. I love her though, but, you know, very, very close with my mom. I went away to college and I studied finance, and I said I was going to work on Wall Street. That's just what I was going to do. And I graduated during a time where 9/11 had just happened. And so a lot of the offers were being rescinded. I was still flying to New York to do interviews. And I was like, I'm going to go into Wall Street. I'm going to go into Wall Street. And then I had met someone at one of the big 4 public accounting firms that introduced me to forensic accounting at the time. And, you know, I didn't understand whether that was kind of dead people and numbers or what, because it was during the time of WorldCom and Enron and Adelphia, and a really exciting time to be involved in those types of cases. And because I'm risk adverse, I chose to go that path instead of the offer that I had to go to Wall Street, even though in my mind I was going to Wall Street. And I spent some time at that big 4 firm learning a whole host of things about who I was as a professional and how to advise clients. And then I became idealistic and said, I want to turn around companies, because all of the companies that I was dealing with, they were bankrupt. And in my mind, I was like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn things around. And I went to another firm and met this great team that up until 9 months ago, I worked with on corporate restructurings and bankruptcy related litigation, which another diverse set of skills. 9 months ago, I was appointed as the chief of staff of our organization, which completely blindsided me, because in my mind, I had just 2 years into the partnership. I was building the rest of my book. I had this 3 to 5 year runway to make everything work. And all of a sudden things were just going to turn on and everything was going to be perfect, right? And then I was asked to come internal through the tenure of my CEOs to help him transform the organization. So it's somewhat of a CRO role for a healthy company, which is all new for me. But one of the things I'm getting a chance to do is see the organization from a different perspective. Again, diversity. I've been as passionate about racial and gender diversity as I am about cognitive diversity, which is the diversity of thought. And so that's the perspective that I bring. I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you. So hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Crockett. I am with the law firm of Miller Canfield, which is headquartered in Detroit. I have been with Miller Canfield for a total of 18 years. God, I can't believe it's been that long, but yes, it has been that long. I actually left the firm for a couple of years and I became general counsel for a statewide educational entity, quite frankly, because I was getting very fatigued. Sort of leading diversity efforts at our firm, being one of the only folks who was charged to do that, watching my friends leave the firm in droves because they were fed up with various things that were going on, not just in our firm, but in the legal profession overall. And I needed to do something different. And that's primarily why I decided to take the opportunity to leave and spread my wings a little bit and do something else, focus on something else. My titles right now, I have 3. I can't believe I have 3. So I am a partner at the firm in the labor and employment group. I've practiced labor and employment law my entire career. I'm also the firm's deputy CEO, and I'm also the chief diversity officer. I have no idea how I attained all of those roles. I'm gonna tell you. I think it's because really I spoke up a lot, particularly about DEI and the importance of it. And I gave myself permission, I think, to try things outside of my comfort zone. And we'll circle back on that as we talk today, because I think that that's really critical. So I'm a mom. My daughter is a young adult now. I actually went through a divorce my first year of law school. So I raised her as a single parent. And I found that I actually did have quite a bit of support when I started my career as an associate at Miller Canfield. It sounds maybe like an oxymoron, but I don't know that I would have been able to be the kind of mom that I wanted to be, but for the fact that I worked at Miller Canfield. And that was something that, you know, was unique when I talked to other folks in the profession. And I wondered why, you know, it was so unique, why it was so difficult for women primarily to be able to sort of balance that and be able to still achieve within their careers while raising children. I am in the process, I should say, of still building out our DEI program at Miller Canfield. I really am. We have made some great strides, I think, but there's always still lots of work to do. So I spend a lot of my time working in the DEI space while also trying to help steer the firm strategically. But we really try to make sure that DEI is built into everything that we do at the firm, which is part of the reason why I got appointed as deputy CEO of the firm. Up until last year, I was the only African-American female at my firm. And I was the first African-American female partner at my firm. So that's my journey. Oh, I'm supposed to tell a COVID fact. So I have, I contracted COVID twice in the last 2 years. The first time I contracted the virus was right after, I went to a convention center in Detroit to try to make sure that every ballot was counted, every vote was counted after the 2020 presidential election. And that was my gift. I got after that. And the second time, my daughter gifted the virus to me when she came home for a visit. So that's my story.
A COVID overachiever. What amazing stories. Hi, everybody. Can I just say, it is so good to be with you. It is so good to share physical space with each and all of you. Here's to you. Please give yourselves a round of applause, and thank you for doing it before I even said. I'm Elizabeth Stong. If you live in this country, I work for you. I'm a United States bankruptcy judge in the Eastern District of New York. It's my great privilege to be here with you. There's nothing like an IWIRC event. There's nothing like the energy in the room. There's nothing like the energy in the room last night. I've lost my voice. There's nothing like this energy. Never lose that. We need it. We will never stop needing it. We will never be done. The good news and the bad news, I think, is that as we've been thinking about this program and thinking a lot about it, we'll never be done. What's my narrative out? The very short version, because it's a longer story than some, is that I looking back, spin the telescope around. I have a very logical career path, right? Federal judge, law firm partner. One move from a firm, Cravath, that lots of people leave, to Wilkie Farr, where lots of people stay. I was lucky to be a litigation partner for about 10 years. Never practiced bankruptcy, by the way. I'm a poster child for reinventing yourself, following your heart, figuring out what you're about, doing that, staying with that, and so long as your eye's on that, making good decisions, even if they surprise you sometimes. New York practice, clerkship in Boston, law school, fellowship between college and law school, southwest of France. If you know a language, keep it up. You never know when another language is going to be helpful. That is also a DEI point, I think. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like yawn even, like every other bio in the Bar Council bios of judges. But turn it around. None of those steps is anything I would have told you it was on my horizon, on my radar screen. I'm from Northern California. If you'd said, you're going to do the New York thing, aren't you? I said, are you kidding me? The answer is no. But I did, and I loved it. New York's a bunch of villages. It's not a big city. Big firms have their pluses and minuses, but one of the pluses is you can make a difference, and you get fabulous training. And when you show up as pro bono counsel, people pay attention, and they should. Any pro bono counsel, people pay attention, and they should. So I never dreamed I'd do that or that I'd like it, but I did, and I did. But I knew it wasn't the only thing I wanted to do, because I went to law school, and I probably even went to college thinking that the point of my life should be to make a difference and to figure out how I can help, and then to do that, whatever it is. And that's the thing on the horizon that I kind of keep moving toward. So never expected to, law school made sense, because that's how people, back then we said women, anyone else hear this? It's good for women to have a credential. My friends, it's good for people to have a credential. It's harder to dismiss you. When they think you're serving the coffee just because you have a cup in your hand, and then you sit down and run the meeting, that helps, actually. The part that you can sit down and run the meeting, you will make more difference. So didn't expect New York, sure didn't expect to love it, but I do deeply, deeply, deeply involved in my community, especially these days, because until recently I never left it for over 2 years. Never expected to go to big law or to stay in big law. And people say you're doing the partner thing. I say, I love what I'm doing, and I love that I get to do the big case work and the pro bono work, and to write, and to do some stuff to help women and people who are not much in the profession think about getting in the profession. But I'm not. That's not my goal. I didn't really think about it either way. And then of course I was a partner for 10 years. Never knew about the bankruptcy practice or the bankruptcy court. Sort of stumbled into hearing about it at a bar meeting where I was representing the New York City Bar Judiciary Committee that I served on for many years, and thought, wow, there's a federal court that fixes things. I'm about fixing things. That helps. I love to help. And where it's a process of being appointed that's got nothing to do with politics, your political party, or your senator. And so I kind of tucked it away. Never put my name in when I heard there was an opening, and was so grateful I would never be picked, because I'll say to my ED&Y colleagues, it was of course Judge Eisenberg, revered Judge Eisenberg's seat out in Central Islip, which is like 1,000 miles from Brooklyn, where I live, where my daughter goes to school and where we go to church, and you fill in all the blanks. And then they moved the seat to Brooklyn, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually sad that I'll never get this job, because this would be so great. I'd walk to work and be in my community. And then, of course, one thing led to another, and here I am, and I've even been reappointed. So I guess the takeaway from that I would offer you is you've got a story. You know you're about something. Anyone who shows up at an IWIRC meeting knows they're about something. And if that's your compass, if that's the thing on the horizon, you'll make good decisions. You may not know what they are. You may not know, when you go out and it's raining, you're going to get wet. You may not realize that it's raining when you step outside. You may not know the business card title. You heard this in all these stories that you're aspiring to or dreaming of. But and if you're lucky enough that you, and especially if it includes my line of work, being a bankruptcy judge, first of all, see me after class, and second, look in the mirror, see that person, see a future judge, right? See a future corner office partner, if that's it. Look in the mirror. Don't let someone else tell you, hey, don't look like, no, not you. You always heard me say this recently, right? Look in the mirror, see a future judge. So that's my story backwards and forwards. It actually is logical, and it looks logical, but it isn't logical in the way you think it is. I did not wake up and think, this is how I'm going to get here and here and here. I thought, how can I make a difference? And that's what I tried to do. My COVID fact, what do you think? So I ran the Boston Marathon a week ago Monday. My thing, not very fast, but I think I beat 12,000 people, and I think 20,000 people beat me. Now, when can you come in 20,000 first and feel good? This is why you should all put this on your list of things to do. When do you have total strangers cheering for you? I mean, imagine if, as you're walking up to the podium or turning on your Zoom, there were people saying, "You got this," and holding up signs. Good job. It's not a bad experience every so often. I think there's a lot of metaphors between that experience, and restructuring and life. But that was a subject for another program. We did that program last week with Molly and Judge Gonzalez. You may know that Arthur Gonzalez. You may not know that this fall he's going to run his 35th New York Marathon, 35th at age 75. Anyway, there you have it. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you. So, Michelle, let's start with get into, right, the substance here, what we were really hoping to cover. What are your thoughts on programs and initiatives promoting diversity, and whether they need to differ depending on the sort of size of the organization?
So I definitely think that focused, intentional DEI programs are necessary if you truly want to effectuate change within your organization. Those key terms that I emphasize, though, are critical, focused, and intentional. I will tell you, I am not a fan of the term initiative in this space, because in my mind, it implies some sort of one-off, right? Like some sort of an event or some sort of goal that you can, tick off a list and say, we did that. Okay, we're done. Let's move on. What we should be really striving for is sustainable long-term change within your organization, such that DEI is embedded within the DNA, really, of your organization. And because that's the goal, there is no cookie cutter approach. There is no one size fits all. There is no toolkit. You probably see that. You can Google DEI and there are, toolkits pop up. There's no toolkit that you can pull off of the internet or somewhere else and insert into your organization, because your DEI program has to fit your culture. It has to fit your organization. So that means it's going to have to be tailor-made. It has to be. So it's a very organic sort of process, if you will, in terms of development. So obviously, I think the size of your organization has to be factored into that equation as you're trying to build that program, because there may be some things that work, say at, Ford Motor Company, or, name another huge Fortune 500 company, that's not necessarily going to work at your particular organization, at your firm, right? So they may be able to bring in, for example, y'all know the acronym DEI is expanding like crazy these days. So it includes lots of things now. It includes social justice. It includes environmental justice, mental health, all these things that we weren't necessarily talking about, like maybe even 5 years ago, we're now talking about in the DEI space. Larger organizations can really build those things into their DEI programs in a way that you may not be able to, at least not right away. I'm not saying that you shouldn't strive to do it, but you may not be able to do it right away. And you might not be able to even do it on a large scale. So you just got to think about your culture. You got to think about the size of the organization, what you actually can take on and achieve as an organization, and then set your planning process out that way.
Thank you. Shante, anything you want to add to that, or weigh in on that?
Yeah, I do agree that as an organization, you should take your size into consideration. I think that, size, sometimes, I will say more often than not, the larger the company is, right? They might have, additional intellectual capital. They also have additional access to financial capital, as Michelle indicated, which means that, they can hire a DEI head. They can put together a more robust mentorship or sponsorship program. And maybe you might not be able to do that at a smaller size firm. But I think what should not differ based on size is the entity's commitment to diversity, the entity's commitment to gut checking itself to see, is it building an inclusive workplace? And that tailor-made approach to what works for your organization. I think, our DEI head always says, you got to look through the lens of the talent life cycle, right? And that's doesn't have anything to do with the size of an organization. Each organization recruits talent. Each organization tries to develop talent, retains talent, right? And eventually there's a portion of succession planning. And so if you are doing what Michelle said and embedding it in your culture, in your strategy, it shouldn't be a parallel program that just runs along the side of things. Because what happens when we first started this panel, we were talking about pitfalls, is that's pitfall number one. What happens is one person becomes responsible for implementing it, and it doesn't have the organizational power that it actually needs to effectuate any change whatsoever. So that's the only thing, I will say, as I spill hot water on myself. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. So that's the only thing I would say is that commitment shouldn't change based on size. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you for that. So, Judge Stong, the recent confirmation of Judge Jackson to the Supreme Court was a momentous occasion for Black women and more generally, right, for diverse communities in the U.S. What are your thoughts on current diversity initiatives aimed at promoting diversity in the judiciary? What else do you think we can be done?
Wow. Am I the only one who literally had tears in my eyes as I watched that White House press conference and saw President Biden flanked by Vice President Harris and Judge someday soon, Justice Jackson? Is a transformative moment. And for women in the judiciary, for everyone, actually, I think we need to be inclusive in our joy on that one. But it's a hard question because I was surprised to learn several years ago as we really began to take a deep dive in these issues in the judiciary that the bankruptcy bench is the least diverse federal bench. What is that about? We have, I think, one of the most diverse populations appearing before us on a regular basis. We are judges appointed by judges, right? But we are the least diverse bench. I think the path to a judiciary that reflects the bar, our communities, our litigants, our colleagues in the clerk's office, but everything that we should represent. I think that path begins in high school, actually. And I would ask you, humbly beg you, get the word out, show up, help people look in the mirror and see themselves as you down the road. High school students across the spectrum, but specifically including diverse and traditionally not overrepresented in the profession and on the bench. They need to hear and begin to think of themselves as people that can have these jobs. Same in college, same of course in law school. But by the time you get to law school, we're already missing a lot of people. So I want to fix those leaks right in the pipeline, and you can help. You can show up and do this, and there's a lot of initiatives underway. And I think IWIRC would be in a good position to help connect people to those. But I think that's viewing it as not a, well, did we get a diverse applicant pool for the opening that came up because we get one every 3 to 5 to 10 years? Sure, that's important, but if that's the first time you're asking the question, It's like if you're opening your cupboards to find the ingredients to make something and you forgot to think about it at the store, they won't be there. So thinking of it as sort of a long-term investment in our communities, our society, our justice system, and of course our profession, I think is a big part of it. There are specific things you can do to help, we do some of them in our court, to help people get the experience that will give them both the experience and the confidence to put their names in, coming to that last part of the picture, when there is an opening. And that would include our junior lawyer advocacy workshop that some of you know about, where we have an opportunity for young lawyers, including the biggest, fanciest firms, who don't get a lot of opportunities to hear their voice in a courtroom, and it's different than not, to do that. And so that when the opportunity comes maybe to present something for a pro bono client, to present something as one piece of a big first day motion calendar, something like that, they've done it before, right? They're not quaking in their boots or doing what I did when I was as a mid-level associate in my first year, maybe at Wilkie Farr. We had the big takeover case with the expedited discovery in Delaware and all that stuff. And my assignment going around the table and in the room, in the conference room, was to prepare and defend the deposition of the expert. And I'd never done that before. And so I went to see the court office partner, 1 in the morning, something like that. We were working all night, saying, well, I'm sure that Debbie or John would do a better job because I've never done this before. Like, what was I thinking? Fortunately, I'm still grateful to Steve Greiner. He said, oh, you'll be fine. Was there something you wanted to talk about? You can't count on that person saying that to you, right? But giving those opportunities to people, giving them to your colleagues, and working with your courts to have, for example, an opportunity for a lawyer to come who doesn't otherwise get to be at the podium, whether it's on Zoom or in person, and I'm doing it in person in June, to hear their voice in the courtroom. I think all these kinds of things and more are things that we as judges need to own. We can't just say it's not our problem, not our job. We love our colleagues, of course. None of this takes away from how much we love our colleagues, but we do need to be sure we will never be done. I grew up in San Francisco area. It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. I remember as a kid, you paint it, you sandblast and paint it north to south, and then you don't say, tick the box, we're done. We did a diversity, inclusion, wellness, environmental, recycling, healthy eating, go for a run program. It shouldn't be that there's one bucket for making money and one bucket for everything else, right? But you turn around and start doing it again the other direction because you're never done. So those would be some things, but it's a big issue. We need to work on it. We need your help.
Thank you, Judge Stong. So for the next topic, we wanted to discuss initiatives relating to mentoring, retention, promotion, and sponsoring of diverse talent. And I think I'll take the mentoring and retention piece of it, and then I think Tayyibah's going to talk about sponsoring and promotion. And I'm going to try to keep it brief because I feel like we're definitely not going to get to all our questions. Nope. The reason I feel personally strongly about mentoring and retention, because I think effective mentoring can help increase retention. It's also something that I personally have been involved with at my firm recently. I'm co-leader of our Attorneys of Color Network, and in looking at ways or things that we can sort of help with retention, we're trying to develop a mentoring program, a more structured mentoring program that's really aimed for our diverse attorneys. My firm does have one that for all attorneys at the firm, but it's not very formal in that it's kind of an open door policy. There aren't hearings. You don't actually have an assigned mentor, and I think it puts a lot of the burden on associates to be proactive, right? And so in that, if they don't go talk to a partner about a certain issue, whether it's work-life balance, promotion, partnership track, diversity, they may effectively not end up getting any mentoring. And so some of the sort of characteristics of the program that we're currently literally working on and trying to kick off in the next couple of weeks, and things that we think are going to help it be successful are, we're trying to get some data collection from the attorneys that we're actually trying to service and help out, right? Get a sense from them, where do you feel like you need advice, where do you want to get mentoring, right? And that can change depending on where you are in your career. I know that when I was pregnant with my first daughter, I really wanted to have, a working parent, working mom, really, mentor, right? I wanted to hear from them, how they managed to juggle everything. But I didn't necessarily need that when I first started my career. So that's sort of one of the things that we're going to do. We're going to try to get input to make the program structured, but also a little bit personal, so that when we do pairings, our associates get what they really need, what they really want. We also want willing and active participants. We don't think that mentoring is going to really work unless you have a willing and active participants on both sides. We're looking to train both mentors and mentees so that they can be more effective mentors on the one hand and mentees on the other, but also the goal, I think, is not only an increasing retention, but hopefully having relationships that organically, right, grow and that last well beyond, the 1 or 2 year plan that we have in place, right? There's going to be an aspect of it that there's going to be some accountability, right? We want both the mentor and mentee to report back. And I think on that piece, there's been a lot of internal discussion. We've trying to figure out and find the right balance, because on the one hand, I think that if you have too much structure and you're demanding too much of mentors, at some point they might say, well, I'm not sure that I want to sign up for this if I have to report, every little thing that I do, if I meet with them on a sort of weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, is it working for them? So we're trying to find that sort of right balance, but I think accountability is important, because we definitely don't want to just have a pairing and then they talk once and then they never talk again. That's not going to work. And then the other piece of it is we want to make sure that we market it internally, right? So that our associates, firms are revolving doors. People come in and go all the time. And so we want them to know that this is a resource that's available, and we encourage them to use it if they're interested in it. So again, I'm trying to keep the answer brief because I'm sensitive to the timing. But those are some of the things from a sort of mentoring and retention standpoint that we've been working on. We also have every other year an Attorneys of Color conference where we get everyone together really to get this sort of this same kind of energy that we have here today, right? But to get it with all of our diverse attorneys, for a long weekend. It's going to be in September in San Francisco, and then it was in DC. Well, because of COVID, we haven't had it in probably 3 years, but it was in DC the last time. So those are some of the initiatives that we've been doing and working on.
That's really interesting, and I think that is a good segue into what I'm going to talk about. And I think to preface the conversation, a lot of firms and institutions have been doing a lot around recruitment initiatives. And so, for example, myself, I went through a diverse program, which is how I ended up getting a work placement at my first firm, which was Weil. It was the first job. It was the first time I'd ever stepped in an office. So, I was at LSC. I was top of my graduating class. I'd done a lot of things on the side in terms of extracurricular, but I didn't have that kind of naturally open door to kind of get my foot in the door and get started. And so I think those programs are incredibly important. And I think a lot of companies are now doing that very successfully. For example, at Deckard, now 50% of our trainee associate intake are diverse. But as you move up, the numbers start to drop off, right? So the key things to address now are kind of retention, promotion, and sponsorship. And I think for retention and promotion, the key is really sponsorship and really understanding the difference between mentoring and sponsorship. So Dania talked a lot about mentoring, but sponsorship is the idea that there is somebody at your firm who is kind of blowing your trumpet internally and externally, who is invested in your career, who is working with you on your business plan, on your career development to make sure that you can succeed. And so that is really critical to ensure that diverse talent can progress through the ranks and get to senior management. And so some of the things that we've been doing is we launched in 2015 the Sponsorship and Sustained Support, or SAS program, for senior women associates to help them navigate the path to partnership. And that program includes skills-based training, such as how to write a business plan, how to implement a business plan, individualized sessions with partners, small group sessions with firm leadership, to really kind of help them graft and develop and progress. And I mean, I went through that program this year. I found it incredibly impactful and really helpful. And when the program was launched in 2015, prior to that, 12% of people being made up to partnership were women. In 2022, I think 52% of lawyers promoted at Deckard were women. So it's had a tangible impact. And we're now rolling it out to diverse talent as well, because we recognize that this extra support is needed. And some of the other initiatives that we're doing is diversity liaison partners within each practice group who kind of monitor assignments for equitable distribution of opportunities and workflow, and ensure that diverse individuals are being mentored and sponsored and getting the right opportunities they need to progress and get the right experience. The other thing that we're doing is we have a diversity dashboard internally, which allows the senior management at the firm to be able to monitor what sorts of assignments diverse talent are getting. And then the chief diversity officer at our firm meets quarterly or monthly with the senior management to discuss progress, to discuss the statistics, to make sure that diverse talent are getting the kind of experience and exposure, both internally and externally, that they need. And I guess lastly, I'll just mention the Mansfield Rule. So Deckard achieved the Mansfield Rule Plus certification in 2020. And we are Mansfield Plus status certified, which means that the firm reached 30% diverse lawyer representation in notable number of current leadership roles and committees. And Deckard is one of 14 firms currently piloting this program in the UK. And we found that, again, it makes real difference. So I think I'll hand back to you, Dania. I'll keep it short.
Thank you. No, that was great. So I think I'll do one more question, and then maybe we'll do the roundtable just to, yeah. Judge Stong, what do you think should be done to make more people comfortable with bringing their whole self to work, right, and express their individuality?
You know, it's such an interesting question because it sounds like an unadulterated, unalloyed good, and it mostly is. Of course, there's probably some outer limit. I do, after my morning run, I do usually take a shower before I go to court, for example. But I think it's a top-down and a bottom-up thing, and I think it can happen one conversation at a time. I was reminded by a colleague years ago when I bumped into her on the street. There's a lot of judges in our neighborhood, and said, "How are you?" And she said, "Fine." And she said, "I have to remember from you, that's a question, not a greeting. How are you is a question, not a greeting. Wait and listen for the answer. Don't just say, how are you? And then here's your assignment or something like that." So that's one little thing I try to remind myself. First thing in the morning, everyone's busy, right? How are you is a question, not a greeting. Be sure to ask it and listen to the answer. And if you're lucky, someone will ask how you are back. I think food is very powerful. We have pizza or Chinese food as a group, and group is defined broadly in our chambers, law clerks, interns, and me. And I think when you break bread together, you form connections that make people comfortable with being who they are and not feeling like they're gonna fake it till they make it or hide it under a bucket or something like that. Everyone's going through a lot these days. I think authentically being there for your colleagues, and for those of you in more senior positions, understanding that your deadline and their life emergency may have an irreconcilable conflict, and probably you should take a breath. This is true confessions, right? I guess we won't get that order out. It's fine, actually, it'll go tomorrow, it's fine. So those kinds of things, it's top down. It's not coming from top down. That sometimes means opening up a little bit, stopping at the point of oversharing. It's bottom up. It's asking, how are you listening for the answer. It's a question, not a greeting. Stuff like that.
Thank you, Tayyibah. Anything that you would add?
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with everything that Judge Stong said. And I think it's really about shattering stereotypes of what a judge looks like or what an attorney looks like, and creating safe spaces at work to enable people to bring their authentic and whole selves to work. So whether that's through engaged and active affinity groups, we have a lunch and learn empowerment series with diverse associates, as Judge Stong mentioned, like breaking bread together. And I think, other things that are happening in this space are, for example, the Crown Act, which obviously prohibits discrimination based on hair texture, etc. But I don't think institutions need to wait for legislation to implement initiatives to ensure that people are comfortable bringing their whole selves to work. And I think, as Judge Stong also mentioned, obviously the pandemic it's changed the way we work. It's kind of given us a window into each other's lives when we're on Zoom and, there's a child crying in the background or a dog running into the meeting or whatever's happening. And I think it's made everyone realize that we're multidimensional. We're not just kind of working bots. And so we really need to continue that dialogue and that conversation as we return to work. And I think the other thing is the shift that we've seen in terms of emphasis on mental and emotional well-being. We need to continue that, checking in with associates, making sure everyone's doing okay, understanding that social anxiety is real, and kind of providing sustained support for diverse talent and talent generally. And then the emotional intelligence with which now we approach management decisions, which has been another kind of shift during the pandemic. So these are all things that we can take from the pandemic and continue to ensure that we continue to create safe environment for people to bring their whole selves to work.
Yeah. I would just add one thing, Dania. Just talk to people. I mean, be human. Take all the pretenses out of it. Just talk to people. Get to know them, right? If you talk to people and you get to know them, just like if they talk to you and they get to know you, they feel like you authentically want to get to know them, and therefore they will bring themselves to work. I think it's less hard than I think people make it. I mean, I know a fair amount of you in the room. When I walk into the room, I feel comfortable because I know that at IWIRC, I feel at home, and that people are looking out for your best interests and they're just talking to you. So I would just add that in addition. I don't know if you had anything else before we go into.
Are we going into roundtable discussions?
Oh yeah.
Unless you want to add anything, I think it's a good time to sort of go do the breakout sessions.
Single, mindful of time, answer, thought, further question in response to that. Let's go. Who's at, you're gonna be table number one. And introduce yourself, by the way.
Hi, Sejal Kelly from Omni Agent Solutions. Look at that, I'm being directed what to do.
You look great.
Well, hello everyone, good to see you. So we were tasked with, in terms of promotion and leadership, how does the industry change since you started? I started over 20 years ago, and oftentimes I was the only woman, and definitely the only woman of color sometimes in a room, and even with larger companies, there was a very small number. I was really lucky in Boston, where the bankruptcy court actually brought all the affinity groups together. But what I have seen is, yes, there's more women, but necessarily the makeup of the industry, overall, the industry hasn't changed, because it's very difficult for us to, for whatever reason, it's just a difficult industry. There's a lot of hours, there's a lot of work. But one of the things that we were talking about is the socioeconomic, but also our cultural differences. Coming from an Indian background, bankruptcy has a negative connotation. Like, it's not seen as a positive solution. So me saying to my parents, or me saying to people, oh, I work in the bankruptcy industry, that is not they are not like, yay. So it is not necessarily, and Jolene and I were talking about it too, coming from an Asian background, like that is not a positive thing. They want us to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, and if they're like, oh, you're in finance? Like, you chose finance as a career? I'm like, So does every guy that I know that I was like with an MBA. And that's okay for them. They're like, but he's an iBanker. I was like, but he's also another word, and that's not nice. So that's kind of what we've seen, is that the industry has changed. It's great that more women are connecting together, and it's great that we are seeing more diversity in backgrounds and heritage, and that's what I like to see and focus on. But as an industry as a whole, I think that's harder, but we do have an opportunity now. And we haven't seen the promotion in leadership because frankly, everybody's been at home. So, but we have an opportunity now because we can keep the mothers if we do keep a hybrid format. We can keep certain people in the industry because you're taking away some of their limitations.
Fabulous observations. Really, a round of applause, please. Really interesting observation about stigma. How about we save companies, we save jobs, we get creditors paid, we help families save their homes. That's my elevator speech. Not that I take the elevator. All right, table number 2. What's your question? What's your answer? And I do need to remind you that we have a big here from. So if you want a break, it's going to be tiny.
How about 30 seconds or less?
Okay, great.
Emily.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Okay. My name's Emily. I am an associate at Richards, Leighton and Finger in Wilmington, Delaware. And the question we focused on was discuss how your respective companies are leveraging diversity, equity, and inclusion and some of the results. So we all talked about how our firms are incorporating diversity inclusion committees with recurring meetings that we're all encouraged to attend, and also women's initiative focus groups, also with recurring meetings. And the results for that, we said, were women are supported with more allies and you get to know people on a more personal level. So it's really great for young associates to have women allies who are in the firm. So yeah, that's what we talked about.
And she's under time. Thank you, Emily. But tiny percent of me is thinking, oh, just what we need another meeting to go to. But you know what? If you don't show up, you can't make a difference. All right. What's your question? What's your answer? Who's your spokesperson? Your background.
Hey, good. Thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Maggie Burris. I'm with the law firm of Bailey and Glasser, LLP, and we focused on the question, discuss features and mentoring programs that you think work and their pitfalls. And I think we were looking actually more at the positive impacts. And at my firm, we're about 75 or 80 lawyers, so a smaller firm. And across practice groups, we get together once a month. And one of the best things we've done in our meetings, in our women's affinity group, is we do a roundtable where we discuss like a brag session, and it can be in your personal life or it can be in your professional life. And honestly, coming out of that, we've seen all of the good news that people are sharing that women often don't share with leadership, with the partners they're working with, making its way up to the people that actually have power in the firm. And it's getting shared more broadly, and it's really helping women succeed and get promoted in the firm. So it's been wonderful for us.
I love that idea. How many of you have ever submitted something in response to Sherry's request for news for IWIRC member notes? The rest of you, next time, you've got something, right? You are better than you know. You are better than you let people know. So please, I love brag session.
Take it. Hi, everyone. I'm Jocelyn, secretary. I'm in-house counsel at Oak Point Partners. And before coming in-house, I was at a small boutique restructuring firm in New York City. So I've kind of seen all levels. We focused on, do you see a shift, positive or negative, in terms of emphasis on diversity and inclusion? We said we do, and we focused both on the negative and the positive. We said that the negative, we feel like there are certain levels in the organization, certain levels in the organizations might see the programs more as a fad or something that they have to do. Maybe not taking it as seriously as they should, sort of a check the box. Okay, we have one, but then nothing comes out of it. So that would be a negative. Is that my timer? And positive. Positive, we see more programs, more opportunities to have a mentor. So at least the opportunities are there. We just need people to take them seriously now and to move them forward.
Right, not check the box. Great points. Thank you, Jocelyn. All right, next table. Thank you. Applause while we hand the mic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Bent. I'm a bankruptcy partner at Baker Hostetler in New York. Does my time start now? Okay. Discuss how your respective companies are leveraging diversity, equity, and inclusion and some of the results. So we talked about the fact that we have a work allocation program to make sure that assignments are given out equitably. You've all heard of the situation where someone might not get a certain type of work and other people's do because people like to work with people that they like. And then the possibility is that someone can slip through the cracks. So with this program, everyone is being paid attention to and making sure that they're being developed at the same pace. The other thing we talked about was the accelerators program that exposes mid-level diverse associates to firm management so they can understand the business of law, but also get access to the people that are running the firm. And then we talked about a sponsorship program for women with one-on-one pairing with management. One other thing we talked about was just identifying seats that are leadership positions within the firm and starting to think about who should be in those seats, who it makes sense to put in those seats, and trying to align them, creating kind of like an informal pipeline to get them in there. Because, you know, when you talk about comp and things like that, trying to convince a committee is way easier when you have someone that understands the importance of these issues that is actually sitting on the committee. So those are some of the things that we talked about.
You're listening to the bell. Camille, first, it's great to see you. I hadn't seen you yet, and wonderful points. Note the word program, not initiative, right? Initiatives go like this. Programs are just, you know, another part of the landscape. Have we been? Thought so. Okay, so we'll go here next, and then this way. Who's our spokesperson? There you go.
Hi, good morning, Sydney Darling. It's like very crowded over here. I'm an attorney with Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman in Morristown, New Jersey. Our topic was focused on metrics or measuring diversity. The questions were, how can it be measured? What metrics are successful, what aren't, and what are the pitfalls? And I think really it makes sense to start with the pitfalls because that seemed to be what we talked about the most. It's really difficult to even know necessarily who is diverse. We don't always know, you know, what someone's religion is, sexual orientation, gender, background, and I think what you folks are talking about on the panel is it's all these different experiences that you bring to the table that makes you diverse. So it's not just what we can see, but it's, you know, it's hard to measure. And then Trish brought up, you know, the importance of inclusion in addition to diversity, and how do you measure inclusion? That's even more difficult. But obviously the two metrics are numbers and feedback, and there are pitfalls with, you know, trying to get feedback honestly from people and true anonymity, and how do we get people to care who might ignore the surveys even if they're anonymous, and how do we get people to share? So thank you.
All right, great points. Thank you, Sydney. My friends, who's our mic?
Hi, everyone. I'm Vicky Tickle. I'm a lawyer with Macmillan in Vancouver, Canada. We focused on the question of how has the pandemic affected, if at all, the recruitment of diverse professionals. The first point we came up with was that it actually helped in the sense of it avoided the need for people who couldn't afford to travel. So Canada, like the US, is a geographically very big country. People might be going to law school on one side of the country, want to interview with firms in different cities. And if you're from a family that can't afford for your parents to pay to fly you from Halifax to Toronto to Vancouver to Calgary to Montreal and stay in a hotel and put you up, that was a factor that we felt that leveled the playing field significantly. And I heard the timer, so I'm going to leave it there.
Time is up, and time is up in lots of ways. I'm so sad to say we could go on for hours, but instead I have an assignment for you. Spokespeople, all of you, write good notes. Write them now. Pretend this is the end of the hearing. We're going to go back into chambers, and I'm going to say, okay, what do we do next? What do we do next? We take those notes. We give them to Sherry. We compile them. We get them back to you. And we think about this not as a pilot project or as an initiative, but as a long-term commitment of IWIRC. So we need your notes, but you also need you, and you've earned your break. So in just a few minutes after we sum up at the panel, we'll be on that break. Keep the conversation going. And over to our fearless moderator, Dania. And thank you, my friends, and apologies, my friends.
Thank you, Judge Stong. So we've talked about a lot of DEI topics today. Really, we've barely touched the surface. If you look at the number of questions that we had, we could have a day-long panel, conference on this. But I just want to wrap it up. And what are some final thoughts, takeaways? Michelle, I'll start with you.
So I'm going to try to be really, really quick. Okay, practical things. So avoid the diversity and stir approach. What do I mean by that? We're going to increase diversity representation and then we are done. You can't stop there, right? Make sure that you are laying the proper groundwork before you roll out a comprehensive DEI program. You've got to try your very best to bring people along with you. I learned from experience. I was likable in a China shop. Let's go, let's go, let's go. I've got, leadership on board. I'm going to do everything. You cannot do everything all at once unless you bring everybody along with you. What else? Connect DEI with legal. You got to have a legally sound DEI program. They cannot be siloed from your legal department. So it's wonderful to have a DEI coordinator or manager or officer or whatever. Are they rolling out programs that are going to be legally sound? So that's really, really important. Two last things. Be flexible, especially in this space, right? Because as we're returning back to work, sort of, kind of, how are we going to make sure that our environments are inclusive in this new environment? Huge, huge, huge. Last but not least, be flexible. Don't be afraid to fail. Not everything that you put in place initially may work. So what? Try again. Go back to the drawing board. Doesn't mean that the DEI program in and of itself has to be thrown out of the window. It just means we got to try something else. We got to take a different angle. Okay, I'm done.
Shante.
The only thing I'll add to that is use the grassroots approach where you can. Don't always just shove it down from the top, right? I mean, it's always great if you can meet in the middle. Use your team member networks, employee resource groups, depending upon what you call it in your organizations, because something that is ran by people who have a strong passion and interest can help propel organizations.
All right, guys. Well, that was the fastest hour and a half I've ever sat through in my life. So let's do one more round of applause. So much hard work went into this. So we're going to dismiss the break. It's only for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. So all the snacks back there are open. We've got lots of good stuff. So chat amongst yourselves.